It's very rare that you see me so solemn. It's very rare that I am at a loss for words. I always have something I can talk about. And I had already prepared my Dhamma talk. But then I heard I heard a voice. You might just say, I got this inspiration that would make more sense to the ordinary mind to go and retrieve my my special book. It's not a book that I often teach from because I don't think that just as a whole we are ready for it. And that in many ways it could choke off someone in the early stages of their practice. But it's called the Dhamma that every Buddhist must follow. It's a treatise by Amang Norpu Pamo, who's a great Dharma king. Well, I guess you could call her a queen. And I want to share a little bit from it today because I know you're wondering what are the tears all about. But it's my great sorrow. How difficult it is for us to apprehend the true Dhamma. And how we live like ordinary beings. Even having this wonderful Dhamma, not able to comprehend it or to take it as something casual and insignificant. And therefore, we don't change very much. And that how some of us give our lives and others spend their whole lives trying to understand and take in its meaning. And yet fail to do that. And I think some of that has to do with us not being willing to just tell people the truth. Tell it as it is, as we know it. And let people decide what they will do with it. The masses will decide this is too much, it's too complicated, all that's not required, and they'll walk away from it. And there are plenty of places for people with that view to go and who just want to dip their toe in, who just want to taste enough to be satisfied with today or with tomorrow or even with their things. But there are not many places where people would be willing to give everything for the truth to be known. This is one of those places. And so I had asked Maureen to sing that song. That's one of my favorite songs. You know, we talk about the Dhamma coming and shaking you out of your seat, and they was laughing and all that. And I just couldn't get into it today. Because today it's really hitting me how serious it is. Maybe it's because I watched the news this morning. I don't know. But what I did take away from that is that the children of darkness are smarter than the children of light. And they're more vested in their agenda than we are in ours. And it's why many times they prevail and they win. It's because we dilly-dally and we play tag and we fiddle around and we don't take things so seriously. Except we take our complaints seriously. But what it takes to really have the wisdom to address the issues of life, we don't take that so seriously. The work that's required. So we spend day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, stumbling around in our ignorance and talking about the conditions of the world, or being discouraged and disillusioned because we have not developed what it takes to make a difference. And so I'm sad for us today how we could have so much wisdom available to us, and yet we go along our merry way, doing whatever we do with our lives, and thinking that that is so meaningful. The blindness of it all. Now, I do know that at the end of my life, I want to breathe my last breath knowing that I stayed true regardless of the cost. I stayed true to my own resolve about what truly makes life meaningful. So I wanted to talk a little bit about discovering one's conscience. And then I also wanted to talk about balance and the illumination of balance in one's life. But I also wanted to talk about refining one's perception. Like, these are three different talks. And yet they are one talk from three different sides. And whether I can pull it all together remains to be seen. But we're going to give it a try. I'd like to start with I think we'll start with conscience. My Buddha master was called the future lion's roar Buddha, R-O-A-R, the future lion's roar Buddha, in 2001 by this very Dharma king, or female Dharma king, Pamu. At that time, she had prophesied that he was destined to be one who awakened in this very life and would expound the incorruptible Dhamma in a way that this generation of those who would be overcomers, not everyone, but those who would be overcomers, could understand it. Sometimes I think he has stepped into that, the lion's roar Buddha. But this is his teaching. He said that upon recognizing one's own conduct, one should repent and rely on the master in order to reach the other shore. Now, in this sense, the word repent means to drop our stubborn justifications for continuing to hold to the things we hold to think the way we think, to speak the way we speak, and to justify our actions, when within our heart of hearts, or even it doesn't even have to go that deep, even right on the surface, we know that that wasn't beneficial action or conduct or thought or speech. But yet we have this stubbornness that we hold on to it regardless. So just think of the word repent in that way. Not however you were associated with the word in any past spiritual practice or belief system. Just think of it in that sense, that to drop our stubborn justification for how we have just acted, what we have just said, what we have just done, how we are feeling right here, right now, in the present moment, when it does not align with how our heart and our wisdom tells us is the proper way of being. He said that we must recognize the various shortcomings in our behavior. But we spend more time looking at the shortcomings in somebody else's behavior. And because of that, it causes us to dig in with our resistance and our obstinacy and our justification of our own behavior. And so he said that we have to develop a conscience, and an awakened conscience. An awakened conscience is not necessarily the same thing as a worldly conscience. There's some ways that we think of being in the world that justifies our actions, but that's not necessarily awakened consciousness. And we can see our justification for some things. For instance, our staunch views on, if you just look at the world of affairs today, and we don't have many Muslims in our midst, but we have many Jewish people in our midst. And I look at some of the carnage that's perpetuated against the Palestinian nation, and I'm wondering, how can a people who had that and worse done to them rejoice over what they're doing to another nation? They may consider this the right conscience of a people, but it's not an awakened conscience. Now, I'm just being honest with you now. I'm just being true. It's not an awakened conscience. It might have some relevance. It might have some justification in a worldly sense, but not in an awakened sense. And we can point to just about everything that's happening. You know, I'm looking at what has been imposed now upon Mexico. Mexico now has to be responsible for all of South America. And it's not going to be possible. So we've just become a bully, and I don't see us marching in the streets for Mexico, for Mexicans' rights. We're just concerned about ours. What's best for us, whatever it does, whether it crushes another nation, another country, another people. And it's all right with all of us. Or if it's not right, when the rubber meets the road, the bottom line, it's going to be self-preservation. But the Buddha calls this a completely unbalanced view. And he said that when we live this way, we can know that because of cause and effect, even if we win today, we're going to be up against this same battle. Because those that have lost, those that we have crushed, those that we have put down, it's their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren who've known nothing but carnage and destruction and war, are going to rise up against us. How could it be otherwise? We have to change our fundamental way of thinking, and we have to develop an enlightened consciousness. And so the great lion's roar Buddha talked about some fundamental dharmas, in this sense, ways of understanding that we have to practice. We practice them until the ways of understanding become our understanding. And he gave 7 different practices for us to work on. And that if we actually practiced them, worked on them, not studied them, not memorized, not glance at them from time to time, not say, oh, I know what they are, but if we actually did them, we would begin to transform and become them. We talk about this 100th monkey syndrome, like a shift in consciousness when enough of us reach a certain level. That may or may not be true. But what I do know is just knowing the number 100 is not going to take us where we need to go. We need to each one cultivate it, and then each one just teach one. So we've gotten something wrong about the Dharma in the West. We've westernized it, and we've made it, we've fashioned it after our own mindsets and our own proclivities. And thereby it's losing, or has lost, its power, its efficacy to transform. It's just become some other thing to study, to talk about, to get certificates on, and to create livelihood around. And I'm ashamed for us. And I'm sad for us. But we think of conscience as that which helps us to ultimately judge what is right or wrong, what's beneficial or not beneficial. And we do that from a cultural standpoint. In our country, some things may be more culturally appropriate than in other countries. But within Buddha land, within the land of the Buddha Dharma, we have precepts and we have vows. And the yardstick or the measurement is how well we enter into them. So the Buddha said that in most cases, or generally, people who are even attracted to the Dhamma have had prior or previous lifetime engagements with the Dhamma. So there's a natural inclination towards this, looking for something higher, looking for something different. I was teaching in New York yesterday, and the lady whose house I was staying at last night, you always know who has the questions because they vie for you staying with them that night. That's like, I know this is going to be an all-night talking thing, and she started as soon as we got in the car, all the way home and all the way until I just went to my room. But she was asking all these questions, and because the Dharma talk touched her. Actually, I had prepared a talk because this was a a fundraising for, the nun that we just ordained a few months ago. Well, already she and the monk whose temple she works at, she lives at, went out and they started looking for a place, and they found a 16 or 18 bedroom nunnery, Catholic nunnery for sale, and they're trying to acquire it, and they started a fundraiser. She hasn't been a nun for 3 months, but she's like fired up, and they moved on with this, and they asked me to come up and give a talk at their fundraiser. And I came. But as I started talking to the people, I realized that my talk was not, I just said, you know what, let's just forget about this. And let's just start over. And then I just started talking because their hearts and their minds and their heads were somewhere else. And at the conclusion, on the way home, she said, how do you think like that? I mean, where do these thoughts come from? And I remember when I was a Taoist, and I was a Taoist because the words were so wonderful. I didn't understand them, but I was like, what kind of mind thinks of these kinds of lofty sayings? Like, I want to be like that. And I went to my Taoist grandmaster, and I'm just so excited. He looked at me and said, Buddhism is for you. I'm like, no. I looked at that. I'm not interested in that. I want this, And he said, no, Buddhism is for you. And so I told Pannavati that, it wasn't many years later that I thanked him because I had a romanticism with the lofty words of Taoism. But he was saying to me, you need to go to kindergarten. And I'm not offended because I didn't know what I thought I knew. I didn't understand some things that I thought I understood. First of all, I thought I was a good person. Oh, man. I guess in comparison, in a worldly sense, I was a very good person. But in a Dharmic or Buddhist sense, a sister was severely lacking. But ignorance is not bliss. I was glad to know it. It's like when we don't know it. I was glad to know it. And little by little, I've been working on it, and I'm still working on it. I was ready to take it up speedily because I opened the book and just started reading somewhere in the Majjhima Nikaya, and the Buddha was saying, like, if you do this practice for 7 years, you'll wake up. I'm like, I can give 7 years. I've already given 35 to something else. I can give 7. He said, matter of fact, 7 months. I said, that's even better. Then he said, 7 days. I said, I could give you a little more time than that. But 7 days you could wake up. Now it's been 20 years. I'm still working at it. So I'm not saying to anybody you have to get it tomorrow, but what I am saying is that we need to pay attention, and we need to decide what we're looking for and why we're here, because I think we have a great opportunity to apprehend something. Sometimes it's difficult when one is moving alone, but when one finds one who is like-minded and the two move together and it becomes 5 who move together and it becomes 20 who move together, a lot can be accomplished if we're not just playing, and if we are not stubbornly attached to our confusion. So some days I give a very encouraging talk, but today I'm giving a really serious one. It's not for everybody. Those who are still babies, that's all right. Keep playing in the sandbox. That's all right. There's a place for you. But sometimes those of us who can take strong medicine need to hear some to rattle their cage and get them back on the path. So I'm hoping we have a few of those today. And if the rest could just indulge them the way they indulge us every other talk about our little, surface stuff. it would be good. He said that when we get introduced to the Dharma, like we're so excited about it. He said, because it's good in the beginning. He said, but then as we start going through it, we don't continue as we did in the beginning. We start to think we know. We know what this is. We know what that is. And we become instructors of others before we should. And then we become so focused on others that we don't continue, we don't finish our own course. And then we mislead others. Some of us want to be friends with everybody because somewhere in the world we didn't fit. But we come into this happy place, a do no harm place, and we use up and consume the atmosphere on our neediness. That's not what this is for. Some of us come because we went to AA for 15 years, and this is the next step after AA. But that's not what this is for. But he said that those who are really drawn and who can really put forth the effort to overcome, to strip away the habitual tendencies that have bound us up, usually come as the result of rebirth linking karma. But there are others who hear it, and they are taken by it. And so they look to the ones who were there for their direction and their instruction. What kind of example are you setting for those? He talked to us about 10 kinds of qualities or essences that we should be constantly looking at to keep us on course and on track, to refine our perception, if you will. And some of us don't even realize that we've lost our way or we've lost our view. In the approach of natural great perfection, the category of mind, the great teacher Dojam Lingpa said, "Ah, son of spiritual heritage, if you examine minutely the mind streams of people who continually devote this present life to physical and verbal acts of virtue, and to those who spend their whole lives engaged in harmful actions, you'll find that there's not an iota of difference in the minds of both types of people with respect to their perpetual attachment and aversion, hope and fear." He said, if they gain freedom because their mind stream is freed. And if they're confused because the mind stream is confused. But since the mind stream of neither type of person has been freed, there's not a bit of difference as far as their wandering in samsara or in the states of suffering. So hence, whether virtuous or harmful actions are done, they still give rise to only temporary happiness and much suffering. So that should be a wake-up call if you're still suffering. That should be a wake-up call that the good and the bad have the same mind if both of them are continually swimming in a mind stream of suffering. It should make me say, what am I doing wrong? What am I not doing? Where have I missed the boat? But if we just continue on with our excuses of why we suffer, because we're good people after all. So suffering must also be the eventual state or perpetual state of even good people. Then you need to throw this Dharma out and go look for something else. So I'm asking you today about your level of suffering, your capacity to hold the vicissitudes of life, and your capacity to walk in a kind of personal integrity, and your capacity to arise to the occasion of the vows that you take every day and minute by minute. And see if something needs to be done. If there's more work that needs to be done. If we are fooling ourselves. It means that my virtuousness has not reached a level. It has not reached a certain state that alters or shifts or transforms the structure of appearances for me. So I know I have not reached that level. And I need to pay attention to what hinders me. And he talks about some very simple things, because we think that the Dharma is something that we study. But it's not something that we study. It's like the finger. He said, my Dharma is like the finger pointing to the moon. And we're just stuck in examining the finger, the fingernail, the imprints of the fingerprints. We're so busy studying the finger. The moon is out of sight, out of mind. I'm saying we're putting our focus in the wrong place. In the study as study, in the meditation as meditation, in the wrong place. Finger pointing to something. And we should look at where it's pointing. And we should aspire to reach that destination. And so he gave us practices that will actually transform and refine our view, that will allow us to enter into the vidyas, the abilities, the prajna, the wisdom, the power that is manifest when a Dhamma becomes embodied. He said the first one is to practice enduring insults. Since such practice can lead one to accomplish the supreme internal peace, regardless of what is coming at one from the outside. That as it stands, when we hear something unpleasant, we become agitated, we become angry, we become resentful. We lose our peace. So he said, practice enduring insults. Now, to practice enduring insults, you have to be what? Insulted. So if you have an aversion towards insults, then you know you haven't even stepped into the practice yet. I don't care how much you read about things or how well you can practice enduring insults when you're sitting by yourself alone on a pillow thinking about it. But it's in that moment, enduring insults, can one hold it then. That's where the real practice is. Do you understand what I'm saying? I'm trying to encourage us to step it up a notch so that you can actually enter into the glory of accomplishment and illumination. But it's going to take bumping up our game. I know there's only going to be half as many people in here next week. But my feelings won't be hurt. I know when they go outside to the car, He said that one way that we are able to practice enduring insults is to practice the 4 limitless states of mind. Limitless, not limited. Limitless. Loving kindness, loving being kind. That's for me, my family, my friends, my tribe, my group, my whatever. As long as it's my in front of it. But he said without limit. Limitless. That just uproots taking sides. You know, it uproots cliquish behavior. It uproots our sense that our family and what's good for us is more important than your family and what's good for you. It uproots our sense of entitlement, our privilege, and our fragility. Limitless, without limit. So wherever you notice your limit, that's where you need to put your effort. We like to play it safe, stay in our own. You know, they have the saying, if you can't run with the big dog, stay on the porch. No, but we have to practice stepping off the porch because that's the only way that we're going to enlarge. If you can't sit there and work with your own mind on getting rid of your own hate for your enemy, because that's how you get rid of an enemy. When in your own mind, you give up that label of enemy. And so we start taking some words out of our vocabulary. And we stop demanding things from a people who don't have the capacity to give it. And we understand they don't have the capacity to give it. Then the anger should subside. And we should think what would be useful to help them to develop a conscience, to cultivate. I mean, unless they're just crazy, can't get it. Then there's other safeguards for people like that. But, most of the wickedness that's done in this world, not done by crazy people. Matter of fact, but it's by angry people. By disillusioned people. By people that there's hope for. And those people maybe put someone who doesn't have the capacity into positions of power. But it's those people that we need to get to. And we can't do it if we're pitting ourselves against them. But understanding how they think and developing the skillfulness to talk with them just like you talk with your son or your daughter or your mother or your father when you have a disagreement around views. With the same respect, with the same sense of really wanting them to understand, wanting them to find a better way to get it right. That kind of way of approaching. With loving kindness, loving being kind. Somebody asks you, can you do something? You have to, yes, I can. Or, why do I have to do that? Can't you just respond in kindness? Yes, I can do that. Or, no, I'm sorry, I can't. Why does the attitude have to come with it? What is that? We need to take stock. Or are we just frauds? And goodness knows I'm not trying to run you away. I'm trying to rope you in. Don't walk out here and say, it's no way I can't get that stuff. But I'm trying to say you actually can, because you're making choices every moment. But maybe you didn't realize that you were making a choice. Well, I'm just letting you know that you're making a choice every moment. That these things are not above and beyond your control or your ability. Not you intelligent people. No, you're making a choice. I'm just asking, does your choice line up with the aspiration to be awake? That's all I'm asking. With compassion, we should be with one another. With appreciative joy. Okay, so you don't appreciate everything somebody does. You know, appreciate what they do good. Find something good in them to appreciate when you're not feeling them at the moment. Instead of going to the dark side of wherever our disagreement is, in that moment, can you turn your mind towards something that you do appreciate about them? That's the training. That's the real training. It's not hard to do unless we're trying to cling and cleave to a perception of ourselves. And when we do cleave to that one, that's how self-hatred develops. Because we know we're frauds, no, we're not even authentic, and we start thinking there's no hope for me, there's no answer, or the Dhamma can't work, or whatever. But actually, the truth of the Dhamma is working perfectly. If you see yourself as a fraud, acknowledge that to yourself and decide what you will do with yourself. He said that we should get along in a harmonious and a friendly manner. How hard can that be over, excuse my language, over shit that's not even important? How hard can that be? We even see bad people who can get along. I mean, you know, gangs, that's what they're made of. A bunch of bad people, but they have loyalty to each other. We don't have one iota. But he says that we should develop this way of viewing each other with kindly eyes. That's why I cry today, because I'm here all the time. And I see everything. In our hearts, we're deceiving one another. He said that we must practice loving living beings and seek peace. You know, the Buddha, his clan got wiped out, you know, in his lifetime. They were always fighting. I think it was the Kosalans. Excuse me, I'm getting a little cramp in my foot. They were always fighting over a waterway that was between the two nations or whatever they were. back there in 500 BC. And he kept saying, you all should not fight. This is enough water for both of you to share. And he'd go down to the battlefield and he'd just stand. And they decide to put off the battle or the skirmish. And then in a little while it would rise up again because each side wanted control. This whole thing about having to control. And then one day, he said that's what they want to do. And he just didn't go down. When they went to war, his clan lost. At the end of the Buddha's life, he was back out in the woods. You know, we talk about, oh, somebody bought this land and they, you know, this grove, Anapandikas Park and Gositas Park, and they bought all of these places where his disciples could come and practice. And he had kings that came to see him, and he had great and rich merchants who came to see him. But they were looking for some type of a worldly, they wanted something worldly from him, worldly accomplishments. And when that wasn't coming in that way, some of them got killed off by their children to take their kingdom, and others said, not enough money in this for me, and, you know, different things. And here and there, those great ones fell by the wayside. He was back out in the woods, and instead of eating in palaces and at the king's table, he was out there eating spoiled food, but he was still preaching his Dharma. And actually got a hold of some, and he already had so many stomach problems that just took him over the top. So if you got in this because of some kind of worldly gain, that's not this. This is for one who has a certain conscience and one who has a certain great wish for living beings to dwell in peace and in harmony with mutual consideration of one another. So inwardly is the Buddha land. It's not outwardly. This world will always be this world. We may make some difference, but what we're doing is we're pulling people from this world, and they're being translated into a Buddha land. So they're dying to this world, and they're becoming alive or born in another world while they live in this one. And the troubles of this world don't touch them. And they make their mark while they're here, helping in what ways they can. This is a different thing. But what comes with the aspiration of it is a way of being in this world without harming oneself and without harming others. A way of being in this world without suffering, even though there may be suffering. And when you find that, it's so sublime that you want to point others to it, but you have to find it first. To know it directly, to enter into it, and abide in it, even while you're in this world. There is that reality. And I want to ask you to not lose hope and not give up hope that that can be found But you have to die to this world. It's dying to this world. We become alive to that world. And we give life to this world just in our being here. Our very presence diffuses some of the darkness. This is not something that we get by meditating. You wonder why I don't teach a lot of meditation techniques here. Because, silent illumination arises by itself as a natural occurrence of one with right view and one whose mind is still. So we turned it around here, and we're thinking that we can effort ourselves in. But actually, it's the opposite of efforting. It's about giving up. It's about surrendering. It's about divesting ourselves of a sense of self so that we become all things to all people. That expansive mind that finds resonance in every other being and in every situation. When someone does wrong, I know what wrong is because I've done wrong and I do wrong. When I encounter selfishness, I know what that is because I have been selfish and I am selfish. When I encounter anger, I know anger because I have been angry and sometimes I am angry. No matter what I am accosted with, I don't have to repulse it or push it away as some other because I know it altogether because I am also that. And I can hold it until it's transformed. I want to ask you this week, if you would just spend this 1 week being the Dharma. Try it on for size. Take that dress off the rack and go into the dressing room and try it on for size. Just this week. You don't have to do it forever. This week when someone comes at you and you get that trigger, just say, that trigger, that's a made-up thing. I made that thing up. And when those words come, can you just hear the words? Without coloring them, without them meaning anything, without tying it into something that was said or done in the past. Just hearing what the person has to say. Recognizing that they have literally lost their mind if they are upset. And if you can hold them in that moment, if you can say the words that soothe, if you can just take down for a moment. If your sense of who you are is not wrapped up in being right. The lady told me last night, she said, what you say is so true. She said, sometimes I can see this I coming into being. She's got the theory. I can see this I coming into being when I say something and somebody disagrees with me. And here I starts rising to defend, that view and becoming solidified and all of that. And she said, but you just can't help it at that moment. I'm like, sure you can. It's like, do you want to? It's like, how much do you want to as opposed to do you not want to? And when you reach that tipping scale that you want to more than you don't want to, then you will. You're not going to always be successful at it, but one by one, bit by bit, you will get better. Because you will feel the joy and the reward that comes from stepping into your own great aspiration. So I'd like to just ask you this week if you would do that. Practice being the Dhamma when situations arise. And if we can have a conversation about that next Sunday. You don't have to feel bad when you fail. Just know that you failed. You know, that's all. It's not about feeling bad about it. It's about knowing. You have to know what your duty and what your obligation is to others. And that's to hold them when they are failing. And see how that makes you feel. What kind of mastery that brings up in you. And what kind of relief and what kind of happiness. I remember when Deirdre said, you know, there was a time we talk about all these things and it didn't bother me at all. She said, then the time came that it started bothering me. And then one day we were at the, I think it was the Dharma contemplation. She said, and you know, we say like, how do you feel? Which words touch you? How do they make you feel? She said, right now I feel mad. She said, I just feel mad. She said, I don't even know why I feel mad, but I just feel mad. And I'm like, okay, just keep pondering that. And then she said, it started occurring to me that I'm not who I thought I was. You see, this is the progression. And then she was no longer mad. She says, like that, I'm glad that this shows me where my slip is hanging. So I can address that. I can deal with it. That's how this works. So don't get upset or discouraged when you're not feeling good about yourself. Just recognize and do something different. And then the joy will come behind that. And then you'll like being exposed. Maybe not so much by others, but you'll like seeing for yourself. And you have a chance to do something about that. But here's the thing, that when you do something about that, you're doing something for everyone else who's around you, who's with you, who's watching you. And helps them know they can also be that way. So in this way, as you're saving yourself, you're also saving other beings. Let's just put that into practice next week. It wasn't the talk I had planned for today. But I think it was one that is offered to us. Because we have been putting forth the effort. Because we have been dropping aside all the superficial talk and the superficial Buddhist pride. Because we really do want to know. And because we really do want to live the life that we sing about in our song. That this inspiration came up today. So I thank you for your practice. And I say, continue on. May you be well and happy and peaceful. May no harm come to you and no danger. May you always be able to meet with the inevitable difficulties of life.
Sometimes the darkness calls me, swears my soul to keep. And that's when I start drinking. I drink myself to sleep. I drink to all that's holy. I drink to the hole in me. I drink to all that's broken. I drink to everything. I say, oh, Mani Padme Om. I cannot bear this burden alone. Oh, Mani Padme Om. Such a heavy load, I will let go. Oh, Mani Padme Om. Sometimes when sleep is falling, in the distance I can see a tiny candle burning, a new reality. And that's when I start open, that's when I pray. Someday I'll awaken, it's not so far away. I say Om, Mani Padme Om. I shall not bear this burden alone. No, Mani Padme Om. Such a heavy load, I will let go. Oh, Mani Padme Om. This song's for all who suffer, for all who've lost their way, for the ones who can't remember bright and sunny day. This song's for all who hunger to awaken from this dream. Songs for all who wonder, is there still some hope for me? And I say Om, Mani Padme Om. We shall not bear this burden alone. No, Mani Padme Om. Such a heavy load, I will let go. Oh, Mani Padme Om. You want to change it? Oh, Mani Padme Om. We shall not bear this burden alone. No, Mani Padme Om. Such a heavy load, just let go. Oh, Mani Padme Om.